Hello and welcome to the Deepwell Ink Entertainment State of D.i.e. on January 28th, 2025. It is just about to turn 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. And this is going to be a very short, brief live stream. Just easier to record it straight as a live stream than to record it separately and then upload it. Considering this isn't a very complex video, just more a matter of letting people know what's going on and why there hasn't been anything until now, and as far as updates and the like. So let's go back to November. Originally there was going to be 2 livestream one-shots and 2 updates for the Legends of Leonida Numine livestream. I did half of the Numine, having an interruption that forced me to cut it even shorter than I had intended. And that tied me up until I needed to rest, so I was unable to continue it then. With the rescheduling of one of the one-shots, that had allowed that to bump up and happen earlier, but then the 2 one-shots happened, and then some other complications meant that I wasn't able to record it on what would have been taking place of one of the one-shots. And in fact, I did in November do both of the one-shots, but have thus far not circled back to the Numine Part 2. That still is going to be delayed further because I'm thinking I should probably reorganize that and do them one by one in separate videos when I have some artwork to go with them to show what they look like, and some other things. I do have artwork from one of the artists that I worked with on a comic that's set in the Leonida setting called Metal Mage. And I do have full rights of that artwork, so I can use those, but that unfortunately doesn't cover all of the Numine. In fact, it largely covers some of them that have already been covered, but I can show some of the artistic interpretations taken with them, considering that they are able to change their form. They don't technically have a canon form. So eventually artwork that I have for them will try to reflect the fact that they can change their shape and that they have power, more than just being somebody who looks strange comparatively. So that is delayed because of that, and I don't know when I will continue that, but I'm going to leave the current live stream up with that regard, in case anybody wants to see some of the information from that and of the map of Leonida, dealing with some of the areas that they cover, for example. December, being the holidays and that my primary form of income is working overnight stocking, I was absolutely completely tied up, and while I had planned on doing that Numine live stream at the end of the month to at least get one out, I was just completely unable to find the time to do that, between either being busy with work, with exhaustion from work, with assorted things preparing for and dealing with the holiday afterward, and more or less just focusing on continuing work on the FARAD system core rules with the time that I had, rather than trying to squeeze in time to make work for one of the live streams. In addition to all the exhaustion from work, every winter the apartment complex that I'm in turns on to heat when it gets cold enough, because that's a law in Minnesota. Unfortunately, the complex that I'm in, the building was built in the 70s, and the heat bleeds through into every single unit, even if you turn the thermostat off for your unit. And this heat can be utterly exhausting and cause me to just simply fall asleep in my chair sometimes, even if I'm hydrating, even if I'm getting up. Sometimes it'll just be too much, and so I have to open up my window in the wintertime to try and counterbalance that, but the window is tilted in such a way outward rather than straight up and down or straight up that unless the wind blows a certain way or it's cold enough outside, it does not dissipate the heat as fast as it is heating it up. And this is made even worse when some people, despite the fact that the building is hot enough, decide that they would like to turn on their heat when they're going to be gone, so that they come back to it being warm when it's already warm. And having to shut the windows sometimes if it gets too cold, because I'm a type 1 diabetic, and if the air temperature is too cold, it causes the body to break down muscle and fat to produce glycagon. Pronunciation is absolutely wrong on that, but I'm not going to look up right now to double check it, but it's basically that it rushes sugar to your extremities to keep you from getting too cold and to keep you from passing out. Unfortunately, as a diabetic, that's not good, because it skyrockets your blood sugar, and then you have to take insulin to lower it back down. And so opening and closing my window in the wintertime can be frustrating, especially if I leave it open because it's too hot when I go to sleep, and then it's too cold, or vice versa if I shut it because it's cold enough but then it becomes too hot. And either way, with dry Minnesota air, it can be very dehydrating. So all that to say that it's extremely exhausting in December and January, especially because of how bitterly cold that it's been getting the last few months. And the last few years with those months specifically. That also applies to how my desktop computer is running, and how it is difficult to do recordings even without live streaming, because I have to have my desktop's fan running pretty much non-stop when I am running my computer. And right now it is running at 95% fan speed for the 3 fans that are in there, because otherwise it starts to overheat too much and it just simply shuts off. And that's absolutely not something that I want to happen when I am working on the core rules, or when I'm doing research, or just any other general usage. It's not good for equipment, and then having to purchase another one when it eventually fails and have to start all over with setting things up. At least the data is on an external drive, so no worry about loss there, except for whatever might happen when it shuts off. Thankfully, as far as power fluctuations from the power grid, or shut off in that regard, I have my computer on a backup power supply, so the only time that it shuts off is either if the power's been off for a massively long period of time, such as if I'm at work and I don't shut it off myself, but in which case I would have saved anything before going off to work, and usually only had it on when I'm in the middle of downloading something or running something else that takes time to operate. Or if the computer shuts off because it overheats. So that's why I have to run it as heavily instead of more around the level of 70 for the fan speed, which is a lot quieter and less annoying. Even when I'm not talking, the microphone picks up the fan noise in the background because I have to boost it up by 5 decibels, because even with me talking plainly with a pop filter in the way and close but not too close to the microphone, there can be times where if I don't boost it, my voice just ends up too quiet from how YouTube processes things and how OBS processes things, and the microphone and its quality itself, especially since I don't have a noise isolated room, so I have to boost it up so that other sounds don't overtake it or block it out while trying to minimize other things. That also leads to some of the other reasons why I have been unable to do as many recordings and such as I would like, live streams and otherwise. On few days I have had the time, but unfortunately I do not live alone, and one of the individuals has a chronic pain condition which can cause issues in the wintertime, especially as that can exacerbate it. And they have had a terrible last few weeks and some trouble last month as well, though I was exhausted largely during that period, where they have been getting only a couple hours, if even that, of sleep at a time. And my talking, even at this volume, can potentially wake them up when they're trying to sleep. And so I've been trying to be courteous and not to do that. And the only reason I'm able to do this particular live stream with the State of d.i.e update right now is because they are out at a medical appointment and I'm not asleep, nor am I at work. So I have the time to do so because the third person in the apartment sleeps through pretty much anything. I sleep through pretty much anything until it's time for me to wake up, usually as well, but that's less of an issue. Hopefully next month, with temperatures being a little bit hotter, not a lot, but a little bit more than it is now, and with them visiting the doctor after having a delay in getting an appointment, hopefully get some help with their pain condition, a little more than what they were getting previously, to help them start getting some more sleep, in which case then that won't be as much of an issue, hopefully. That said, I did also try, despite these issues, to get a one-shot going with a couple of people. Unfortunately, that didn't follow through for being able to figure out exact timing. They're not on Discord, it was from other people elsewhere, so I could not as easily check to see when they're online, just leaving a note here and there. And it's a busy time of the year for people in December and early January, recovering from everything else that happened then. So that's the updates on what stuff has caused delays and other issues. And let's briefly check in on the progress with some of the assorted projects I'm working on. FARAD System is my primary focus for this year, and this year it will most likely have the core rules finished before the year is up. That will include having the 4th alpha rephrasing done, since I had started doing that with the basic open license terms, or BOLT, which would trim back some of the things that were more for explanations and asides and things like that that help people know how to use it, but aren't the straight mechanics for if somebody were to create third-party material. The bolt goes up to a certain point in the FARAD system currently for the core rules. The core rules document itself needs to have some of the updated phrasing move over to the core rules, but that's mostly just going back and forth, copying and pasting and formatting. So I'm not focusing on that part currently, as I'm continuing to do the remaining chapters. Presently, the core rules has 270 pages, and it is on chapter 17, sample sophonts. Now, a sophont is a species that is a people-like species rather than a beast or something else to that effect. So any lineages that are sophonts, they can be humans, they can be robots, they can be goblins, they can be pretty much anything that is not that has some form of communication amongst itself and interaction with itself and other lineages, whether they are sophont lineages or not, but they have enough of an intelligence to be considered a people utilizing tools, etc. That said, with that being chapter 17, chapter 0, what are TTRPGs, we'll get some phrasing updating at some point. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Intro to the FARAD System and Pre-Game Planning. Those are ones that already had been planned to be written later, after other things are done, to be able to more summarize what it's about and things like that as a retrospective chapter be written. So core mechanics, which is chapter 3, chapter 4 skills, chapter 5 sources, chapter 6 domains, chapter 7 conditions, chapter 8 actions and abilities, chapter 9 traits, chapter 10 item design, chapter 11 world building. World building is not finished, but it has a lot in it already that will be expanded before the book is finished. Chapter 12 traversal, chapter 13 interaction, chapter 14 strife. Those three will get some expansion, but they have a solid footing currently. Chapter 15 training, that will get some expansion because of the training paths, which are not requirements, but it will show some of the examples which have been written since that was nearing completion. Chapter 16 sample abilities, there is at least one sample per source which is included in that chapter currently. There will be more that will be included, but at present the main focus was to at least have that minimum present to show assorted things, and then to communicate with people to see what other kinds of abilities they wanted added in. And at some point when it gets crowdfunding processed, hopefully then that will also be a point to add even more into that section. But that's, of course, if it gets crowdfunding, so having something present at least is important prior to that. Chapter 17 sample sophonts, now that has started to be worked on. I do have 13 sophonts that will be included in that. They all have their base lineage traits done, but it's more than just simply their base lineage traits. It's actually having a specific character and all of their assorted traits, all the different types of traits that they may have, which is to be included in that particular thing. So the 13 sample sophonts, and there may be a couple added depending on crowdfunding, are, of course, humans, because they're representative in most tones and subgenres, and they're the easiest to associate with because unless the FARAD system somehow survives until humanity goes to space and some other species encounters it, or AI encounters it and becomes self-aware enough to play it, or some other unfathomable reason, humans are likely to be the only species that will play this game. Certainly within my lifetime, I would say, and most likely just period, given, science being what it is and, the universe operating on the rules that it does. Regardless, humans. And for that one, we'll be offering a human for a Cosmic Horror Noir adventure for how they are designed. Pixies and goblins, they'll be suited for fairy tales and medieval fantasy adventures. Naiads are suited for Mediterranean mythic journeys, as well as Age of Sail. So they will have some details that will lean toward mythic journeys, but also have something to play off with that. Arachne, they will work for Mediterranean mythic journeys, but also for East Asia mythology, and have a little bit of a blend of traits between those. Chem 3 are well suited for Stone Age fantasy, since they evolved from prehistoric Chelicotheridae family, and are mostly influenced from that. Gargoyles, they're perfect for Renaissance fantasy, where there's quite a lot of buildings that have smaller but still present gargoyle forms. Felinae, from the original traits, have been merged into what will now be called Familiata, pronunciation barn, but Familiata are basically house cats, toads, newts, snakes, crows, and ravens, and other types of familiars that have been exposed to magic enough to mutate and evolve into a people, and to blend with one another and be affected by magic that's also ambient magic. And more or less they have they're not quite chimeras, but they have some traits blending between them, and some of those traits may be more accentuated in some and less accentuated in others. They're basically a way to have multiple different types of species under one particular lineage with branching options. Rainics are more vulpine, they're fox people. So Familiata and Rainics are especially befitting clashes between colonial and indigenous peoples, and also Rainics work with East Asian mythology as well to some extent. Kubi are very well suited for Age of Sail fantasy, and as I said earlier, so are the Naiads. The android Kael'ron are perfect for a variety of science fiction subgenres, and the Obeodin and Galenus are both suited for alien sci-fi and cyborg sci-fi as well, as they're both aliens that have cybernetics with them a lot of the time. So there's three that are very science fiction, science fantasy based, and there's one that is more just anything with humans, but the majority are fantasy of assorted subgenres, simply because those tend to be played more often with fantasy than with sci-fi, even though any of them can also be run into any other type of setting and adventure. But they're going to be used as examples for those particular purposes because it covers a wide spread, whereas with the Kael'ron, the Obeodin, the Galenus, it'll be covering cyberpunk, it'll be covering hard sci-fi like stuff like The Expanse and softer sci-fi like Star Trek and Star Wars and Stargate and other things of that nature. And cyborg sci-fi, of course, with cyberpunk, but also with things like Terminator and other things to that effect. So that covers what will be in Chapter 17, Sample Sophons. Chapter 18, Sample Terrors, will be covering a lot of different creatures, monsters especially, that will be things that an Arbiter can utilize in the dynamic plot to challenge the assorted players that are in the group. Now, of course, they can just use other entities that are Sophons as well, such as having different political arrangements and things going on. But the terrors are more creatures that, while any player with group agreement can play something that's considered a terror, they don't have certain things that are more representative of a Sophont. They don't tend to have a civilization of some kind, or if they do, there's some reason why they are exiled from it, or the last remnant of it, or something to that effect. They are more monstrous often, or they are extraordinarily hostile to other Sophons. Dragons would fall under this. Even though they are Sophons, they are typically not building large civilizations so much as territories that they rule and separate from one another. It would cover things such as the Kingfisher, which I adapted for my Zondel Lands of Discordance Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign, though they are from the FARAD system in earlier versions, which, well, I'll leave details off on that. They'll get an individual video. It will cover Sarok that aren't Sarok kin, but the assorted different varieties that they have. It'll cover Quoma. It'll cover basically a spread of different types of threats to potentially face. So that'll be Chapter 18. That will take some time, just simply to sort out what's going to be in the core rules, what's going to be added in there that is representative for not just Legends of Leonida setting, but other settings as well. What types of things are going to be very common. So, for example, having large predators that might be on Earth already, like sharks, tigers, bears, and things that are far more unusual, that are common in fantasy or sci-fi. Chapter 19, Sample Items, will cover an assortment of different things that follow the item templates, whether they have abilities or not, and will list a lot of different types of things that are expected to be fairly common in most settings, depending on the particular subgenre that is in play. So that'll deal with Chapter 19. Chapter 20, Sample Adventures. Now that will be minimal, just simply due to the amount of space that it will take for including that. But just a way of briefly showing a couple of small things. Will most likely refer to the sample Sophons and having them listed as being present, and a few other individuals who are unnamed that can be named by an arbiter that are a couple of pages or so per adventure, just to show here's different things that you can do. They're not meant to be like an entire one-shot in and of themselves, walking somebody through an hour's worth of play, but more, here are sort of different things that you can do, and by getting to chapter 20 you should have encountered enough of the mechanics to know, well, here's some things that you can do. Some of them might be more than 2 pages, but the aim is for a page or 2 for that. And then when crowdfunding happens, some more PDF sample adventures may go beyond the core rules and be available with purchase of the core rules and sold separately after the campaign is done. That leads to chapter 21, Play Your Way. That will be largely encouraging how to customize and optimize the FARAD system for the way that your group wants to play. That will also include some details about how, hey, the duty of an arbiter can be split through shared arbitration, that there can be ways of doing solo play. While that will be listed in pre-game planning, it'll be more or less in Chapter 2 just simply saying that it can be done, and that the system is flexible for those particular regards. But Chapter 21 will more touch on, whether or not you want to use a VTT, if you're playing online, whether you're playing in person and you want to play with a gridded map, or if you want to use the zones, just a very brief summary of certain things that may come up for adjusting play. Like, for example, if the group would like to see some of the environments that they're in and have a more tactical feel, and the arbiter might not be particularly artistically skilled, and they want to show something but they don't know how to go about doing it. Well, it'll give examples of, you can go to these assorted places and search for public domain or Creative Commons maps that can be used, and here's where you can get tokens and things like that, and here's guides for doing stuff with a VTT, or just even sharing an image with a letter and number grid, so people can say you're in this place, you're in this place, and that the arbiter can write down where people are located, after they've decided where they want to be placed. That sort of thing. It's more of a summary of, hey, go and play it how you want to play. And, giving a little heads up that, yeah, we're going to be putting out assorted settings and things like that, but you can also find that there may be ways of converting things from other systems and not using their mechanics, but using their ideas and their dynamic plot or structured plot to start as a seed for your own adventure. After chapter 21 wraps that up, it'll be the glossary and index, and that will basically link to the first or most important places where specific terms are used, and a short summary of some of them that can be summarized in that fashion, with the link of how to get to there. And then the end of the book will be licensing opportunities, which will talk about the fact that the FARAD system will end up being put out under its own license. It'll be put out with the bolt for what material is in there under different licenses as well and what will be allowed, that the logo itself can be utilized with a brief modification for a different version of it, which will say compatible with, rather than just simply the FARAD system, and other things to that effect, to deal with talking about where can this information be found and how to reach out for things that might fall outside of that. And then it'll be maybe a couple of pages for talking about future works that will be put out, and the back page. Presently, the cover itself is just a placeholder, but it more or less shows what kind of stuff that it can do. It's just going to be a lot cleaner and show characters and scenes in a better fashion when I can have the book finished and that all sorted out. And the back cover will largely be more of a blurb, hopefully, with some information from me about what it is the fully adaptable roleplay adventure design system is about, as well as from other people who have given it a look, so that can be set when the crowdfunding is underway. Speaking of crowdfunding, most likely, as I said, the 4th alpha will be finished this year. That we're just about to start on the 2nd month, so I'm 90% certain I will have it finished by then, unless something egregious happens that just causes me to be unable to work on it for a period of time, or worse, though I am optimistically hopeful that such will not come to pass and cause such an issue. However, in the following year, in 2026, I want to spend a significant amount of time doing networking and advertising and getting people to sign up to find out about it, to push out a lot of videos for it, and then either in late 2026 or in 2027, if it's requiring a lot more push, then I will finally bring it to crowdfunding. The FARAD system started in 2012 for when it was originally called Myths and Legends, and before it even had that name, when it was just my random RPG ideas. And that was happening at the same time as D&D Next, which would become D&D 5e when it was just playtest packets. And deciding even at that point that while I'd be okay playing D&D 5e, it was not what I was wanting most out of a system. And even with the FARAD System 3rd Alpha, it wasn't completely what I was wanting, but it was getting closer to that point, which is why I was able to run 3 overlapping campaigns for over a year and a half, and another campaign that didn't get to completion, unlike the other 3, but for over a year, and some one-shots here and there. And so far with the FARAD system, I've had 2 one-shots that were live-streamed, audio, and one shot which was chat only through the dev Discord. So hoping to be able to run some more games through the year, maybe 1 or 2 a season, unless I'm able to get enough people interested to run a mini campaign and then maybe do a session a month. As I said before, with it being this time of the year and with one people in the apartment's pain condition, that has not been really feasible, in addition to just the difficulty of trying to do any of that in December or early January with people. So That deals with the FARAD system. It's currently 270 pages. My guess would be before artwork and formatting finalization, before it gets to crowdfunding, it will probably end up being 350 pages, probably longer. And then with the images added on, at least I would say about 375, 400 pages. Because there are spaces here and there where small images can go. With crowdfunding, depending on how well it does, I would like to increase that even higher to have more images, because this is not split up across 2 or 3 books. This is one big book that doesn't spoil enough that it has to be separated between arbiter and player. And of course, if this crowdfunds and does well enough for just PDF, I'd like to have a version that's be like a kind of like a starter box. It would obviously cost more than, say, a Dungeons & Dragons starter box does, because this would be the actual core rules plus some other stuff included along with the sample adventures and such like that. That's why I want to keep the cost of the PDF low and encourage people to back it for what it is, and not spend too much time and money expanding it even further, though having some stretch goals for things like, maybe if I can, having some additional sample adventures, additional terrors, additional sophons, character documents, having some printable STL files for some of the sample sophons, things of that nature, things that can be added digitally to varying degrees of cost, but not expanding the book too much. Obviously, I want to leave a little wiggle room. I'm okay even if it goes up to 500 pages, but I'd rather keep it under 400 if I can, or 450 if a lot of artwork is able to be commissioned and added into different places. I'm not particularly heavy about that, but I do understand that artwork is necessary both for advertising and for feeling like people are getting their money's worth, which is also part of why I want to keep the cost low, so that it doesn't feel like it's as much of a sting for what will be a lot of text. That said, after the FARAD system is crowdfunded, as long as it does well enough to do so, one of the stretch goals that I want to include with that will be a seasonal zine, which will update 4 times a year with additional content, and to expand the existing Patreon, which doesn't really have anything on it right now. It's just set up so that somebody else doesn't take that name or have any other issues with setting it up later, causing delays. And to utilize that to put out small bits of content that will be collected into the zine, and anybody who backs it for 3 months in a row will get the zine, in addition to anybody who purchases it separately. And those in the Patreon and in the development Discord will be able to help shape some of what will be going into the zines. After that point, then while the zines are continuing, I'll be working on the Legends of Lenaida setting and on Under the Guilty Sun setting and some other settings and adventures and other things over the years. But unless it does well enough that I can stop working at the job that I'm at, I will also be filtering in next year, while I am doing the advertising and doing the networking and the like, I'll be resuming work on the Forge of Twilight pentology, expanding the Dross of Sorrow, which is the first book in the 5-book series. Now that I have given it a long enough period without touching it since the 5th revision rotation that I did, and having encountered Douglas A. Burton's discovered story structure, the Heroine's Labyrinth, and how that, either by itself or merged with the hero's journey, will fit a little bit more closely than just the hero's journey as it was. So I will be working on that a bit that year. I'm not expecting that I will have that first book finished in final form. I mean, it's currently finished in terms of the majority of the plot. It's written, and in this current state, the first 3 books could be submitted for publication or just, tried to be self-published, but I want to perfect them a bit more, and as such, that's why I've set them aside while I was working on the FARAD system, rather than just banging my head trying to not take a break and continue to work on them, especially since I resumed work on the FARAD system just before the OGL crisis happened, and wish I had started on it a couple years prior, but had I done that, then I wouldn't have made the progress on the writing as much as I had. So that will be something that I'll be working on, and I may do things like possibly some sort of way of live streaming that I'm writing for a period of time and answering questions here and there, if I can do that, since I'm not doing Stream of Consciousness with the 4th or 5th book, but rather fixing things up. So I think that's something I can possibly do, and minimizing spoilers, but giving a few samples here and there of what it's like, and doing some videos to promote it, talking about what is Dross of Sorrow and the series about. So that will be something that next year, hopefully, I will be also working on as I have time to do so. As far as other games, those are still put on the back burner. They're not a high focus, as they need a lot more work to bring them to a state where they would be anywhere near trying to do manufacturing prototypes or anything of that nature. Koldaga and Retail Kingdoms and the others are things that will also be able to be tied into Legends of Oneida or to the FARAD system as a whole. So it's important to focus on the 2 major projects primarily. Work for comics and for other stories, flash fiction, short stories, things of that nature. I will try to be doing a little bit of that here and there, using the sample soul fonts in the FARAD system when I am doing the networking and advertising process for the FARAD system. So those can be additionally given out freely with the game itself, to show here's kind of the sort of stuff that you can encounter. Again, lower priority, so those can be added on stretch goals if I haven't finished those, but keeping the cost low by having fiction text, rather than printed collection, though that can happen at some future point, potentially. Comics, not really commissioning people for that presently, but I do have a lot of stuff on back burners, either from previous projects that are long on hiatus or newer concepts. I do have a couple musical albums that I am working on. One for revising Gilded Echoes, and doing that, and one for a separate mythology one, currently titled The Age of Hedone, about the Greek goddess Hedone in a more cyberpunk future, where a lot of the deities from assorted mythologies are finding that they're not getting enough adoration and such to justify staying on Earth when there are humans that are going off to other worlds, or other species that they can potentially find to bolster their worship. So that is another thing separately. And the Age of Hedone may potentially end up becoming a visual novel, mystery kind of thing, romance, stuff like that. I do have several songs for that finished, and a couple songs for the Gilded Echoes update finished. I will be putting out some music for the FARAD system itself at some point. I don't know exactly when yet, since I'm not spending a lot of time on that as much. I did last month at least finally upload the d.i.e theme, and it's 3 and almost 4 minutes long, and I will be uploading some other stuff here and there, but not primary focus. As far as computer or video game design work kind of stuff, like I said, potential visual novel with Age of Hedone, more back burner kind of stuff, looking at some potential collaboration possibilities with that, but that will depend on how that goes, and I'm not currently looking at expending a lot of funds toward those efforts. Any funds at all at present, because those are lower priority. But that pretty much summarizes the current state of affairs with Deepwell Ink Entertainment. My own health has been up and down due to stress and weather and heat and dehydration and such, and trying to combat that. And it's had a couple of weeks where it was a little bit stressful and frustrating for me, but that's thankfully seems to have passed, and it's more or less back toward what's normal. When I'm off work, I'm not getting as much exercise, or if work is lighter work, I might not be getting as much, so that can affect my blood sugar, but in general, it's a lot better than it is. I am hoping that later this year, if all goes well, I and the others in this apartment will be able to move to a different complex entirely. A lot of issues with this particular place, a lot of stuff I'm not even going to mention here. Not a matter of libel or slander or anything else to that effect, but just a matter of not wanting to get into it, especially with this already being more than half an hour and approaching an hour for this update, which I was intending to keep short. But if that does go well, then there's the possibility of, depending on where we're able to move, that might affect my health, with not having as much issue with the heating and cooling and how hot it gets in summer as well, because my room is just a bloody oven. And if that goes well, then I might be able to do things toward improving the quality of the sound recording and getting exercise more regularly on days off in some fashion, which I can't currently install in the way that I want to try to do here, with a foot pedal and a few other things that I can do while still working at my desk. Right now, with the way that it is set up, I don't really have room for that. In fact, I have room for my knees to fit, but I don't want to completely rearrange my room just for what may be only a couple of months before I end up hopefully moving. So that all said, we'll let it leave off at that. Hopefully we'll catch some people who may see this video later in their subscription feed or otherwise, and catch you all later on the flip side. Peace out.